Being the son or daughter of a famous wrestling superstar can be both a blessing and a curse if the person also wants to get into the business. While having a recognizable surname and connections might get you an in, once you're actually in the business, you probably feel a sense of responsibility to live up to your father's legacy. For some, this has proven difficult as their careers buckled under the weight of having to be the next generation of Flair, Sammartino, or Stasiak. Thankfully though, some not only managed to live up to the name, but somehow surpassed expectations and ended up having better careers than their old men. I'm Adam Pachisi from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 second-generation wrestlers that eclipsed their fathers. Join us. Number 10, Mr. Perfect. Curt Hennig broke into the business under the watchful eye of his father, the legendary Larry the Axe Hennig, working in the same AWA promotion that had made the Axe a star. Wrestling since the mid-50s, Larry had won the AWA tag team titles on numerous occasions, including with Harley Race as partner. Curt started as a plucky young babyface in the territory and ended up teaming with his old man, winning the NWA Pacific Northwest tag team titles with him just a couple of years into his career. But the man who would go on to be known as Mr. Perfect was destined to be a much bigger star and returned to WWE in the late 1980s, having previously worked there as an undercard guy earlier in the decade. One of the best all-round talents in the business, Curt perhaps didn't fulfill his own massive potential since he didn't win the WWE title, but he became a major name in the industry and was a two-time IC champ. He got more exposure than his father could have ever dreamed of and created a character that is fondly remembered to this day. Number 9, Jake Roberts. The personal problems and substance abuse issues that plagued Jake Roberts in his later life can be directly attributed to a childhood living under the shadow of his genuinely evil father, the wrestler Grizzly Smith. A large and abusive presence, Smith told his son that he would never make it in the industry and that he should just quit before even trying. Well, Jake had the last laugh because not only did he make it in wrestling, but he became one of the biggest stars of the 80s and 90s and made his papa look like a dickhead. While Grizzly worked consistently for territories in the 60s and 70s, he never became a national, never mind a global star like his son, and was mostly remembered for his work in the Kentuckians tag team. The Snake may not have won the world or actually any title while in WWE, but he didn't need it. His character work was so strong and he was so over that he had a Hall of Fame career without getting his hands on any gold. His legacy is his incredible promos and the memorable angles he was involved in, as well as for being the originator of the DDT. Grizzly Smith's legacy is, well, Number 8, the Usos. It took a while for Salofa Fatu Jr. to land something that resulted in his career properly taking off, but when he became Rikishi, via spells as a head shrinker, Make a Difference Fatu and the Sultan, it was well worth the wait. As the bleach blonde, dancing, fun-loving super heavyweight who liked to back that thing up, Rikishi was a huge hit and became at one point one of the most over acts on the show. A former tag team and intercontinental champion, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2015. But as great and memorable as he was, his big run on WWE TV only really lasted around 4 years, give or take, and he never quite cracked, pardon the pun, the main event scene. His sons, the Usos, however, have been a fixture of WWE TV for over a decade now, have won the tag team titles 7 times, and have a load of classic matches to their credit. Now riding the coattails of cousin Roman Reigns in the bloodline, it feels like it's only a matter of time before Jimmy or Jay, or both, get their own taste of top-level singles success. Number 7, Ted Dibiase. Though not related by blood, Ted Dibiase had to live up to a family name. He was adopted by Iron Mike Dibiase when he was just 4 years old and was likely inspired to carry on the legacy after witnessing his adoptive father die in the ring of a heart attack when he was just 15. A standout amateur wrestler in college, Iron Mike was a gifted technician and worked all over the world from 1950 until his untimely passing in 1969, winning a plethora of titles along the way. After being trained by the Funks, Ted found success in the 70s and 80s working for the likes of Mid-South and All Japan before returning to WWE, having had a brief spell there in 79 as the $1 Million Man. Not only did the gimmick allow DiBiase to live a genuinely lavish lifestyle since it was subsidized by Vince McMahon in order to maintain kayfabe, but the character was a winner and saw him bag the WWE tag titles twice, as well as the 1988 King of the Ring. Like Roberts and Hennig before, DiBiase could have been a world champion, but he didn't need it to be remembered as one of the greats. Number 6, The Rock. Look, Dwayne Johnson not only eclipsed the achievements of his grandfather, High Chief Peter Maivia, and his father, Rocky Johnson, but just about everyone in the entire wrestling industry. Much was made of The Rock's lineage when he debuted in 1996 as the blue chipper Rocky Maivia, but being hyped up as WWE's first third-generation star was something he really had to overcome if he was to become a star in his own right. His dad was a history maker, with he and Tony Atlas becoming the first black champions in company history when they won the tag titles in 1983. Prior to that, the Soul Man was a star in Canada, California, and Memphis and won numerous titles around the US. Long after retiring, Rocky Johnson was inducted by his son into the WWE Hall of Fame. Not a bad career, I'm sure you'll agree, but his kid not only became a huge star in sports entertainment, but a global icon and the most successful movie star of his generation. A multi-time WWE champion and WrestleMania headliner, The Rock was only a full-time wrestler for the best part of 6 years, but managed to solidify himself as one of the greatest of all time in that time. Number 5, Bret Hart. The Hart family are pro wrestling royalty, with patriarch Stu producing 12 kids, 6 of whom went on to become successful wrestlers. Stu Hart is mostly spoken of as the owner and promoter of the Stampede wrestling territory, as well as an almost mythic shooter who would train hopefuls in his basement, aka the dungeon, but in his day he was a wrestling star himself. The Canadian began wrestling in the mid-40s and had his last match in 1986, which was right around the time that his son Bret's career really started to take off. The Hitman rose through the ranks, working hard to go from a technically sound tag teamer to a world champion and main eventer. As the leader of WWE's new generation, Bret was one of the biggest stars of the 90s and amassed a huge following all over the globe. Today, he is often regarded as one of the best wrestlers ever. Stu was often on hand to watch his son's triumphs and must have been overjoyed with not only Bret's but also Owen's success on such a big stage. Number 4, Barry Windham. To some people, Barry Windham is actually one of the biggest underachievers in professional wrestling history. Because despite being a huge star and enjoying much success, particularly in the NWA and WCW, Big Baz had all of the qualities to do so much more. Whether it was down to injuries, luck, or as most say, his own apathy towards the business at times, Windham never quite reached the level of some of his contemporaries. He had big boots to fill, since his father was the legendary Blackjack Mulligan, an intimidating heel who used his huge frame to brutalize the local babyfaces in territories across the US. He was a big draw in Texas, Florida, and the Carolinas, and was a one-time WWE Tag Team Champion, but by the time he really caught fire on a national stage, he was older and worn down with injuries. In it for the money, Blackjack never stayed in one place for too long, always chasing the next big payday, and thus was never made a promotion's world champion. Unlike Barry, who was an NWA World Heavyweight Champion and also etched his name in wrestling history as a member of the Four Horsemen. Number 3, Roman Reigns. You may know him as the big dog, the guy, the head of the table, and the tribal chief, but Roman Reigns was born Joe Anoa'i, son of wrestling legend Sika. Sika wrestled all over the world, from Japan and Puerto Rico to Canada and across the United States. A 3-time WWE Tag Team Champion, Sika is best remembered for his run with Afa as the Wild Samoans. They were a favorite of Vince McMahon, and they, along with the rest of the Anoa'i clan, are treated as family as far as the genetic jackhammer is concerned. But Sika never got much of a push on his own, and watching his work back today, you can say that his style was, very much of its time. Methodical, I believe they call it. Of course, Roman Reigns is very much a modern-day athlete, and not only has a litany of classic matches under his belt, but world championship reigns and some of the best character work we've seen in a long time. It took him a while to get there, but now he is pretty much established as the dreamily handsome face of the company. Number 2, Eddie Guerrero. If you sit and marvel at how good Eddie Guerrero was and how he was seemingly born to wrestle, it's worth remembering that his father was one of the top stars in the early days of Lucha Libre. Salvador Guerrero turned up to a gym one day hoping to learn how to box, but the place was actually a wrestling school, so he thought, sod it, I'll give that a go instead. He paid his dues and climbed the ladder in Mexico, changing his name to Gory in reference to his often wild and bloody matches. His biggest success came as the tag team partner of the beloved El Santo, and as well as drawing big business, he can be credited with inventing the camel clutch. A young Latino Heat believed that he would struggle to live up to his father's name and legacy, since he expected to exclusively work south of the border and, if he was lucky, Japan. Eddie did all that, but he also penetrated the US mainstream, in probably becoming WWE champion in spite of his size, style, and race, things that most thought would prevent him from ever reaching the summit. Number 1. Randy Orton. A true wrestler's wrestler, Bob Orton Jr. was one of the unsung heroes of WWE's so-called golden age. When he wasn't putting on a masterclass in the ring, the cowboy could be seen guarding the body of Roddy Piper and left his mark on the audience, who remembered his superplex finisher and perennially broken hand. A Hall of Famer, Bob Orton also worked for many different territories for WCW as well as in Japan. He knows something about having to live up to a family name, as his father, Bob Orton Sr., was a star from the 50s through to the 80s. A prodigal third-generation talent, it's obvious that Randy Orton comes from good stock and had just about every tool imaginable to be somebody in the industry. But whatever expectations there were for the Legend Killer, it's fair to say that he blew them all away during a WWE career that is coming up to 2 decades and has seen him accomplish just about everything there is to accomplish. More than that, the super smooth Orton is considered one of the best in-ring talents by his peers and, amazingly, looks like he has plenty more left in the tank.